morning, everybody. Good to see you. That's my second time to say good morning, but from a different location anyway. Good to see you. I'm glad you made it today. This shows that you paid attention to your smartphones and didn't try to remember. And a lot of people show up next service probably because they didn't have their smartphone fixed, or they just took advantage of the snow day, okay, in March. So that's okay. We're just glad you're here. Thanks for coming. And a lot of you who are guests with us today, man, we're glad you're here. Thanks for coming, being a part of our family today. And we hope you feel at home. You know, this series has been kind of a unique thing for me because we are trying to cover lots of this big story of the Bible, this timeline of events and activity. And we started a couple of weeks ago with what I believe is probably the greatest event in history, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And you might say, why would you do that then and not wait until a few weeks from now when it's on Easter Sunday? Well, don't worry, we will. It will come back to that. But we are catching the backstory to why we know all of Scripture really shows a timeline. It shows figures of history. It shows people and their lives. It shows really the greatest figure in the story, and that's God Himself. And so we're trying to pull back the layers a bit and trying to open up the doors to see how it all threads together. And so today, as we do it, we kind of go back, and I've used this illustration of a flannel graph. If you didn't have this privilege when you were younger, I did when I was a kid. I had the opportunity of seeing all the Bible stories come to life with a teacher showing me these cutout figures of different individuals and telling the stories by putting them up on the board. And I was just mesmerized. Of course, you know, back then I had never seen a video. So I had no idea, what that would look like or whatever. And so it was incredible. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I used to make my own stories. I would do, everything had to be flannel graph. And so maybe that's how you remember it. Maybe you've had a taste of the Bible in different ways. Maybe you've had a little bit of the Scriptures. Maybe your idea of how the Old Testament and the New Testament fit together kind of came from your background or your history. Maybe you're coming into this completely new and you don't know any of this. You've wondered about it. You've heard people speak of it, but you wonder, where it came from. Well, today, we kind of go into the lives of some people that were a part of what we call the Old Testament, the ancient Jewish scriptures. And I have in my pocket here a coin that was given to me by the son of a man who actually passed away not too long ago, but it was a coin that signifies his years in service to our country in the Air Force. And as I looked at this, I thought, this is kind of a way that the Bible does this too. It kind of has a significance. This actually commemorates his different things that he did in his career while he was in the Air Force. And so this was given to me to remember him and to think of that and to, consider everything that he had been a part of. Now, how many of you have ever received a coin? Being in an Air Force town like this, I'm sure many of you probably have come across one, right? So you know exactly what these are. And, if you are thinking about your own life or your own story or whatever, and you're wondering about, what would be remembered, how would it be commemorated, how would you remember a person? Well, we're going to look at 4 people today that come in the backstory of Jesus' resurrection. All right, it's the backstory of how it all began and where it started and everything. And we're going to look at the lives of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. And we're going to do it pretty quickly. We're not going to go into detail. So I'm going to encourage you, if you know where the book of Genesis is in the Bible, you may want to read more about their stories. And you might get a little confused. You're like, why is some of this stuff in the Bible? Matter of fact, I have a couple things I just want to ask you as we get ready to start this morning, and I want to ask you a couple of questions. So, number one is this. Have you ever thought, why does the Bible have stories of people who are so messed up? You ever read through and you think, good grief, this is crazy. This story, what's wrong with this person? Why? And even beyond that, maybe the second question that follows up is why did stories of people with problems and failure end up in the Bible? Wouldn't it be good if all of the stories in there were about people who really just were successes and they were perfect and there were no problems? Well, you know what the issue is with that? Because nobody's perfect. All right? If you were trying to find characters or figures to go into the Bible and looking for perfect people, you could not find them. They did not exist. Because there was a decision made by Adam and Eve early, and it actually caused a brokenness in the world. If you were here last week, you know we kind of went through some of the cycle of that, but it today has a different effect because we hear the story of individual people. And you may hear your story a bit. You may hear things that sound like you. It may sound like something you've experienced or gone through. And so maybe it's you walk in here today with some circumstances or situations in your story, or it's been in the past in your story, and you're trying to deal with that and wondering if there's even a place for you in God's big story. And so, some statements, maybe you would think this, I don't know. I don't know if God even knows me. You may be feeling that way, or you felt that way from time to time. You have no idea whether God even knows who you are, let alone whether or not you even believe that He exists. Matter of fact, you might even be saying this, I've had a hard time believing and trusting God. I just don't know. From time to time, I don't even know if He's there. I don't know if He's listening to me. I don't know if He wants to be involved in my life or not. I don't know who He is or what He's trying to do. Some of us maybe have had relationship with God in the past, or you are trying to struggle through circumstances right now and you're wanting to believe God or trust God because you always have been able to do that in the past. Why can't you now? So there can be some difficult things. And then maybe your situation is this: you've messed up. I've messed up so much, I know I'm useless in God's eyes. That may be your opinion, but I think we're going to find out that that's not exactly true. You don't have to be thinking that you're useless to God if you have had some kind of mess up in your life. If your life is a mess right now even, you don't even have to think that you're useless in God's eyes, because God has a plan that actually involves people. I'm so thankful for that, because guess what? I'm a people. You're a people. Everybody's people. Okay? And so we all have that opportunity, but maybe it just comes down to this. The things you're facing and everything, it's making you feel weak. You don't know if you can even make it through. I feel so weak that I just can't carry on anymore. I just don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I can actually make it another day because of my circumstances. Well, you know why you feel this way sometimes? Do you know why it's hard to trust God, or why it feels like things are falling apart around you? It actually has to do with a cycle that started in the ancient Jewish scriptures back in Genesis, and it started there where actually you see it. It's a repeating cycle, because you don't only see it in Genesis, you actually see it throughout all of the scriptures that are recorded in the Bible. And so it starts out with this place where God made us. He actually made us and set boundaries. The scriptures say that He made us in His image. So every one of us know who God is by the fact that He is there. We have that openness, or we have that opportunity to know God personally because He created us in His image. When Abby was born, she was created in God's image. That's an incredible thing for any person to know or to understand, that God did this. Doesn't mean you are God or that you are going to be a God. It means that you were created in His image. He wanted you to be able to think for yourself and to have emotions and to love and to understand that, and then also to really be able to choose. And by giving us choice, then people actually chose to follow their own will. That's what Adam and Eve did when they were first created in the garden. God gave them one simple boundary. He didn't give them a lot of boundaries. He only gave them one. And they couldn't follow that. Why? Because they ended up choosing their own will over doing God's will for their life, which led to the next part of this, which the choice caused brokenness and separation from God. It caused everything. Everything that we know, everything that we look at now is broken. Why? Because of sin, because of the wrong that happened there, because people do their own thing, and choosing that, it brought a brokenness, and then it separated us from God. But God created us to be with Him, and the only way He wanted to, the way He wanted to do this was He was going to reach out, because none of us could have ever fixed that separation, that brokenness. And so God said, I'm going to do it for him. And he becomes the deliverer. This is what's an amazing thing. God becomes the deliverer to forgive and to restore. And that's where Jesus comes in. But everything in the ancient scriptures leading up to this, it all leads up to that. You see time and time again how Jesus they're speaking of someone coming who's going to be a blessing. Matter of fact, that's what we see today. The next part of this story, this backstory being revealed, comes from Genesis chapter 12. And he picks a man, God picks a man who has been following God and has been looking after him and wanting to know him. And so in Genesis chapter 12, we start with verse 1, and it says this: the Lord had said to Abram, that's the man who was picked. Why? Well, because he was the one at that time who was closest to following God, and God looked at him and said, Abram, you're the one. And matter of fact, Abram's name actually means exalted father. And so you ever wonder, he has this name Abram here, and later he's called Abraham, which actually means he's going to be the father of a multitude, which is kind of an amazing thing because you hear his story, you'll understand. You go from your country, this is what God told him, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. God is telling Abram to pick up everything he has, his family, his wife, and all these things that he owns. And at the time, he had a nephew, Lot, and he had Lot's family and others. And so picked them all up, and they start moving. He was actually up in the area where we might now know as Kuwait. If you were to look in the modern-day map, that's where Abram was living at the time when God spoke to him. But then the verse goes on in verse 2, and this is what he says: I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. This is the statement that is a kind of a prophecy or something that's coming in the future, and that blessing is going to be that God is going to bring through Abram's family a Messiah, one who would come and die. So that's going to be a blessing to everyone. You know who's included in this, right? It's not just, certain nations or just the one nation that Abram was starting. It's all people. So that means every one of us are included in this promise that was given to Abram years ago that there would be one who would come. Now, it's just like reading any book. You get pieces of the story. And as you go through, last week we got a little piece of the story that there would be one who would come and deliver them. Well, now here is another piece of the story, one who would come and deliver them. And so all they had to do was believe and have faith that it was going to happen, and there it was. Now, verse 3 even gives us even more detail. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. Meaning that there's going to be this protection that God is going to put on this group of people. They're going to exist. They're going to continue to exist. It's going to be a story that you're going to see unveil over and over again, and figures of history will come out of this. And Abram would be the first one. So let's go to Abram, or Abraham's story. You see, God changed his name later on because he was going to be this father of a multitude. Now, for us to go through the whole story of Abraham would take a long time. There is so much to talk about. But Abraham was married, and he married a woman by the name of Sarah. And Sarah was not able to have children. Do you see a problem with God's promise right from the beginning? How was Abram going to be a great nation if his wife couldn't bear children? How is this going to be the case? So Abraham, being a smart man like he was, and working together with his wife, decided, hey, I don't think God is paying attention. Somehow this plan has got messed up. So I think what would be good, and Sarah said, you know what? I've got that handmaid that helps me. Why don't you just kind of marry her or go be with her, and she can represent me, and she can have a baby. Do you see any problem with this already? Okay, it's already starting to develop into an issue that's going to become a problem. Well, Abram does it. He goes and he's with her. They have a child by the name of Ishmael. The woman's name is Hagar. And they go through this thing, and God is like looking at him going, what are you doing? What are you doing? So Abram, he tries to do this fix. He's going to fix it. How can I fix this? And so he tries to come up with a way to fix it, and he's going to try to get now Hagar and Sarah to get along. Okay? That doesn't go so well, all right? Doesn't go so well. God comes to Abraham and says, look, I'm going to make sure you understand. I'm going to make a covenant with you. And he brings about something that many people don't understand to this day, so I'm going to give you a brief explanation. Why is it that this would be the thing? And so for many of us, we are wondering, God asked Abraham, or told Abraham, that he should be circumcised, and every male should be circumcised from then on. Why? Because from then on, Abraham needed to be reminded, look, if this nation's going to happen, it's going to be from you. And you need to be reminded. So as you are together with your wife, and men from then on are with their wives, you're going to see that passed on, and you'll be reminded every time that that's passed on. Now, parents, I'm trying to make this as good as possible so that if you need to make any explanations, you can for kids who might be in the room. Okay? You get the idea, right, though? That's why it was a reminder. So then what happens? Well, then Sarah doesn't believe it. Can't happen. They're given a son, believe it or not, at the age of, and Abraham was 99 years old. Any 99-year-olds in this room? I don't think so. I know that there are a few in this room, though. I do know that are in their 90s. And so imagine having a newborn at your house. Okay? For those of you who are in your 20s and have newborns at your house, you're going, ah. Okay? You know exactly. So imagine this. God honors this promise. He shows it and gives Abraham a son. He gives him a son, and the son is born. His name is Isaac. And one of the things that he has to remember is this is part of God's promise. God did not do it. Even though Abraham messed up the plan, even though he came up with his own plan and tried to figure it out himself, he decided that wasn't going to work. Now, I could tell that story lots more to the story. But this is what's most important. You go to Genesis chapter 15, and here's what it says. He took him outside and said, look up at the sky. This is God speaking to Abraham. And he says, you've got to know this. I promised you, and I'm going to follow it through. He took him outside and said, look up at the sky and count the stars. If indeed you can count them, how many people can count the stars? I always lose track about 3 or 4, you know? Then he said to him, so shall your offspring be. And this is what's the best part of this. Abram's heart was changed at that point. This man we know now as Abraham. His heart was changed to believe in God a different way. And this is what the verses say. It goes on, and it says, Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. In other words, this is the moment that Abraham put his faith in God, to believe that there would be this nation, that a deliverer would come. And so right then, God said, that's what I'm looking for, that kind of faith, that kind of belief in your heart. And that's what it takes for anyone to believe. A man who messed up so much, like Abraham. And that wasn't the only time. You go back and read his story, oh, he messed up plenty. You'd think after giving him a child at the age of 100 with a wife that was about that age too, can you imagine? I mean, you'd think that you'd believe in anything, that God could do anything after that. But yet he still had trouble, and he would mess up God's plans. So then, with this story, there's another figure that comes to our minds, and his name is Isaac, and that's this son that was given to Abraham and to Sarah. They were the ones who were there. And Isaac's story is pretty simple. It's not as long. Matter of fact, God tested his father to whether or not he would do and obey him. And Isaac was the center stage of that. And so in the process of bringing this story into place, this is what you have to remember about this. Isaac gets married, and he marries Rebekah. For this nation to continue to grow, what's got to happen? Isaac and Rebekah have to have another child. They have to have a child to which the nation would continue to grow. So I take you now to Genesis 25. And you see the story from here because they find themselves in a predicament. Rebekah cannot have children either. So they're wondering. And so Isaac's faith is so simple. So simple that he would ask. He says, he prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was childless. And the Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. And this is what's the key part of this. It's not that you can just pray to God and he'll give you children. But this was a part of a promise and a covenant that God had made about a nation and that there would be someone come. And so when Isaac prayed, God answered directly that he wasn't going to turn his back on him. You ever wondered if God has turned his back on you? You ever wonder if God has forgotten? Well, Isaac had kind of wondered, is this going to happen or not? But in his faith, he believed, and God honored it and gave them a child. Actually, not one child, but two. You ever gone, maybe you've gone and anybody here give birth to twins? Any lady in this room? God bless you if you have. Imagine this. Imagine this. So I take you to the next verse here, and the babies jostled each other within her. And she said, why is this happening to me? Okay? So ladies, if you're wondering, is every birth in the Bible just wonderful? No. Okay? And these two children that she was carrying, these twins, they were going to be, and God says, listen, I'll tell you why it's happening to you, because both of them, they're going to be nations. And those nations are going to struggle with each other for a long time. There's going to be all kinds of issues. So, who were these two? Jacob and Esau. So we start then to unfold. Jacob comes on the scene, and Jacob's born, and so we have Jacob's story. And you might say, boy, if you read Jacob's story, you're going to find out that this man would rather lie than tell the truth. He found himself where he could tell the truth over and over again, but instead he found himself messing up the plans that everybody around him, and trying to take care of God's job by trying to put the plan together and fix it the way he wanted it and be in control of his life and not listening to what God wanted to do. The promise was given to Jacob too, that it would happen, that there would be a nation that would come from their family line. Why couldn't he just remember this and think, wow, this is fantastic. I know it's going to happen. It's going to be okay. No, actually, he started having all kinds of children. He decided to get married more than once, had wives. Imagine this. And you might say, why is all that in the Bible? Why does God condone polygamy? He doesn't. These were plans that people made, and God didn't have that plan in mind. Matter of fact, he had in mind that it would be a man marries a woman and they stay together for life. That was what his plan was. And instead, because Jacob was thinking, I got to do this and I got to do that. And imagine this, all right? He marries one wife, and for some reason, she's not having children like he thought she should. And so he marries another one to have children. And so it became between the two wives a competition who could get pregnant. You can imagine what that would have been like living in that house. And the difficulty. And Jacob, he's just kind of like, And then he says, you know what, I think I'm going to go to a couple other women, your handmaids and your servants, and I'm going to have children with them too. Yeah, this is going to be great. Jacob had his own plan to accomplish God's purpose in his life. And instead of following God's will and God's plan and following it the way that he had just seen his great-grandfather and his grandfather have a wife that could not have children, and they prayed, and look what God did. God honored it in a way, and Jacob didn't get it. Now, we don't know exactly why Jacob was so there, but all we know is he was pretty self-willed, and he even was deceitful to his brother. He was born second of the two twins, and it's one of those things where you think, good grief, is this, what's going on here? How can this happen? Jacob, from the beginning, wants to be the one to get all of the credit, to be the firstborn, and to get everything. And so he tricks his brother, causes all kinds of family problems. They don't make up until later, way later in their life. Jacob runs, wondering, and then comes down to it that Jacob really has a person that he wrestles with constantly in his life. And it comes out in a real wrestling match that he ends up having with God himself. And what happens? Jacob will not let go of God. He will not let go of him. And many people will say that this was a pre-incarnate Jesus who came and was there in the flesh and wrestled with Jacob. And he says, you can't let me go until you bless me. I got to know. Instead of trusting that God was going to do this. And so he says, I'll bless you, but I'm going to change your name too. I'm going to change it from Jacob to Israel. And why am I doing that? Because this is where he actually says, from this point on, you and your family will have a history of which this will happen. And you know what Israel means, the name, when he changed Jacob's name to Israel? It means the Lord will prevail. Let me just tell you something. You wondering whether or not God cares about circumstances or situations in your life? Are you wrestling with God about things in your life and decisions you have to make and what's going to happen next and whether you should or deal with or whatever? Are you wondering all about this? Let me just tell you something. God has a plan that involves you. He knows everything about you, and the Lord will prevail. He told that to Jacob, and he means it to anyone who can hear this and believe. Let me show you this in Genesis chapter 35, and it says, after Jacob returned from Paddan Aram, God appeared to him again and blessed him. God said to him, your name is Jacob, but you will no longer be called Jacob. Your name will be Israel. So he named him Israel. The verses go on. And God said to him, I am God Almighty. You maybe have ever heard that God has many names. This one actually is the name El Shaddai in Hebrew. God Almighty, meaning he's the one and only God, the most powerful God. There is no other gods but him. I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and increase in number. A nation and a community of nations will come from you, and kings will be among your descendants. What he speaks of here is his 12 descendants, his sons that he had with these women. And they become what in the Jewish history will be the 12 tribes of Israel. All of this. And of course, those boys all got along so well. If you know much of the story, you maybe know what happens here. These boys all together, they're sent out to represent their dad's wealth. And Jacob was very wealthy. And a lot of it came by dishonest gain. He took it from a man by the name of Abimelech. And he did things to him so that he could gain wealth. I mean, this man, Jacob, was not a good, necessarily, example. Yet God used him to bring about things. He struggled with his own will and wanting what he wanted all the time. Yet God used him. God did not give up on him. And he ended up in the scriptures as a main figure of the history of humans and where the Messiah came from. Imagine this. So one of the sons that was born to his wife that originally at the beginning couldn't have children, but God gave her the opportunity, and one of the sons she had was Joseph. So now we go to Joseph's story. And Joseph is one that kind of leads in because he now is this picture of what a true deliverer can be. Even though, and he was his brother's favorite. The brothers just loved him. Okay? No, they didn't actually. That's not how the story turns out. Matter of fact, how would you like it if your brother or sister came in and said, I just had a dream, and the dream said that you're going to bow down to me and do everything I say because I'm going to be your ruler. Would you guys like that? No, absolutely. Bless your heart. You probably got a brother, don't you? I can tell. Here's the thing. Joseph's story kind of pans out this way. He becomes Jacob, one of Jacob's favorites, and he becomes a one that, he wants to be able to really, be able to follow God. He has a heart after God. And so he starts to be this, and obviously he's the goody two-shoes of the bunch. And the brothers just decide, you know what? We've had enough of this guy. So they let him go out in the field. They let Dad be back at home taking a nap or whatever. And they took advantage of the fact. And so they took a coat that Jacob had given to Joseph, and they took it off of him, and they threw him in a pit. And they were like, what are we going to do with him? What are we going to do? And his brother was going to try to rescue him, but his brother sold him into slavery before he could come and rescue him. And they took the coat that they had taken off of Joseph, and they smeared blood on it from an animal, and they took it back and said, see, he's dead, Dad. He's gone. But they had sold him into Egypt to be a slave. And this is the big thing about it. You'd think that'd be bad. And it probably was at first. I mean, he went into Egypt, and you're going to see from time to time there's slavery and things like that where people owned other people and where people did things. Like, why did God do that? Why did God create slavery? No. Again, part of the brokenness, part of the thing where people decided to do their will and not God's will. And so, see, a lot of times we discount. If you're skeptical of Scripture, if you're skeptical of the Bible from time to time, and you look at it and say, how could God allow this? How could God do this? It was all because the brokenness that was in the world. And every time God had to reach out with a deliverer or a way to bring people back away from this. So you're going to see things like polygamy. And you're going to see things where people treated people badly. And you're going to see where people were enslaved. And you're wondering, why did God do this? God didn't do it. God's dealing with it. People are the one who did it. See? And so from the story and the way it develops, look what they did. They throw him in. He goes to Egypt, throw him in a pit. He goes to Egypt, becomes a slave. And they find out that he's pretty good at what he does. Anything he lays his hands on, he's good at. Okay? And Joseph, just being that kind of guy, what's he do? He has to deal with this circumstance and situation of getting along with the Egyptians who were not godly people. He was tempted to go away with another man's wife, and instead of doing that, he ran away. But then the wife got angry at him for not going with her and sends him to prison over it. And in prison, he starts doing some different things. He doesn't sit still. He just keeps working on and does things. And while he's there, someone lets Pharaoh know, hey, look, this guy, he knows how to do stuff. He's really good at mathematician and strategy and understands how to make things happen. So Pharaoh says, let him out of jail. Let him come work for me. Not only did he move up quickly, but he became like the second in command in Egypt. Now, let me tell you something. If that wasn't a in his brother's face, I don't know what is. While he's doing this, what they find out is Joseph gets to planning and looking at the land, and he figures out there's a famine coming. And they start to save food, and they save a lot of food. And he actually saves up 7 years' worth of food for Egypt, enough to even pass on to other nations. And guess what nation went into famine? Yep, the place where his brothers were living. And so what did they have to do? They had to come after food, looking for food. They had heard, hey, I think they've got plenty in the grocery stores in Egypt. Let's go down there and get some. So they come down, and when they come down there, they come in and they want to speak to someone. And actually Joseph overhears and sees his brothers in the court asking for food for their country, their nation. And this is what happens, Genesis chapter 45. I don't know if you've noticed there's a pattern here. We went from Genesis 15 to 25 to 35, now to 45. There's no special code in that at all. All right? So don't go write a book or think that there's some Bible code that goes along with these chapter numbers. It just happened to be this. And it's the ones I picked today. All right? But it goes like this. He comes up to the brothers. They don't know who he is. It's been several years. He's grown up, you know. No more peach fuzz, probably has some real hair, you know. Grown up, and he says this to them. Hey, guys, come here. Oh, we get to speak to the governor or the guy in charge. Yeah? I'm your brother. Can you imagine the look on their faces? I'm your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now, do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. God had sent a deliverer. Here's a picture in Joseph's life of becoming the deliverer so that they wouldn't die of the famine. They wouldn't die because they were hungry, that they had no food. No, Joseph actually comes in and God brings him here, and he has to go through horrible torture and prison and different things. Had to be sold and abandoned by his family, all of that. And if you know much of the story of Jesus, you know that's just exactly what happened to him. He was abandoned by friends and family. There were people who turned their back on him, and he was put through torture, and then he became the deliverer by dying on the cross for our sin. Joseph was just a picture of what was to come. Whenever you read a story like this and it just kind of spreads together, it's amazing how you can see what was it he put all the story, everything that had happened to him, he staked it all in this one statement: God sent me. Matter of fact, later in verse 8, he said it this way: so then, it was not you who sent me here. I mean, yeah, they put him in the pit and they sold him into slavery to get rid of him because they were jealous and they didn't want him around anymore, and he was that one, and they lied to their dad about it. But he ultimately knew it wasn't you who sent me, it was God. God's the one. So even though they had a twisted, messed up plan against their brother, God still used that so that he would become a deliverer. And you know what ended up happening? He sent for his dad. He sent for his dad, Jacob, and all of their family and everything, and he said, bring them on down into Egypt. Well, at the time, that was a good idea. But next week, we'll pick up with what happens from there. Now, to just point out some things that are important, here's this to consider. If you're wondering, how do these stories get into the Bible and all of this failure by people and all of this, and if God's the main figure, why didn't he step in and take care of situations and circumstances? Let me show you this. This is how it all wraps up. God's plan is never messed up by our messed up plans. Okay? God's plan is never messed up by our messed up plans. So if you think you've messed up something, God's a deliverer. We mess up because of the brokenness and being separated from God, but he's there. He wants to be the deliverer. He wants to restore and forgive and make things right. And it even goes further than this. God will never leave us just because we have left him. Jacob, he left God many times and did his own thing. Abraham left God many times, tried to do his own thing, and then found out that's not the best way. There is never, and you got to know this, there is never a wasted opportunity in God's plan. There's never a wasted opportunity in God's plan. So when we think we've messed up, oh no. God knows exactly how to use that. He even knew we were going to mess up, and he even knew that he was going to love us through it. Let me just tell you something. Just because God made us in his image and because he loves us doesn't mean that he always agrees with us. Sometimes we make the wrong choices because of the brokenness in our life. But let me just tell you a principle that you need to know and remember. God is for people. He's not against us. If he was against us, he wouldn't have made us in the first place. And if he was against us, he would have ignored our brokenness and our choices. But yet he decided to come and to be a deliverer for us. And he did it through Jesus Christ. He did it. See, that's how these stories of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Joseph, how they are the backstory, getting ready and paving a way for this one who would come, Jesus. We'll even see that more next week. But this statement, God is for real people, it's why we as a church say this, that we're people for real people. That's what God has called us to do, to show that love and that deliverance and restoration and everything that God offers. That's why we would say this. You know, if there's any statement you ever want to use to put on the tagline of Fair Creek Church, or who we are as people, we're people for real people because God is for real people. Let me remind you of the cycle that kind of happened at the beginning that we talked about. God made us and He set boundaries. Yet people, always people, it chose to follow their own will. And the choice caused brokenness and separation from God. And God then becomes a deliverer to forgive and restore. Only He can do that. Only He can do that. You might say, right now I feel weak. Right now I don't know if I could get anywhere. I want to show you a verse that the Apostle Paul wrote, and this is what he gave to the Corinthians when they needed it most. He was going through a difficult time in his life, and this is what he wrote. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. It's not about us and our will and us doing things. It's because God showed us grace. What's the point? What's the point? What's the point of all the figures we talked about today, these people in history? What's the point of how this all comes together, how this is the backstory to Jesus being on the cross and then raising from the dead? How is all of this? Where does it all come from? It all comes from this simple statement. And I want you to say it with me because we said it last week. And it will be throughout all of this timeline. Everything that we look at, it will lead to this one word, this one thing in our life that everyone needs, and that's grace. Say it with me. Grace. You may think you've messed up. You may think that God has given up. You may think that there's no way possible. You may think that you're useless in God's eyes. You may think that, oh, hey, you may even to the point where it's like, oh no, I got this whole Christianity thing wrapped up. I know exactly what to do and how to act and what to do. Yeah, I go to Bible studies all the time, and I go to church, and I do this. I even give a little money once in a while, blah, blah, blah. I do all these things. I serve, and we can do a lot of things. But the whole point comes down to, it's not about being arrogant in who we are and what we've accomplished. It's what God's accomplished. His grace in us. And it's sufficient to get you through no matter what. To get you over that sense of self-sufficiency and to get you through a time of weakness. That's what can make the difference. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. Perfect guys? Oh no. But did they know a God of grace? Yes. That's what I need. Do you need that too?